For generations, wizarding society was shaped by one very powerful document, the Sacred 28. It's the list that defined power, status, and blood purity for the most elite families in Britain. But what if I told you that the entire list, the very foundation of pure blood society, was built on a lie? Today, we're exposing how the most influential families in the wizarding world built their legacies on a fraud, and we'll reveal which families were deliberately erased from history. Because the truth isn't just about who made the list, but about the devastating power of a lie that warped wizarding society forever. Alright, so what exactly is the Sacred 28? The official story kicks off in the 1930s with an anonymously published document called the Pure Blood Directory. The author, widely believed to be a wizard named Cantankerous Not, claimed he had identified the 28 British wizarding families that were still truly pure blood. This list wasn't just some genealogical trivia, it was a political statement. It was meant to be the definitive registry of the magical aristocracy. The names on this list are a who's who of the wizarding world's most prominent dynasties: Abbott, Avery, Black, Bulstrode, Burke, Carrow, Crouch, Fawley, Flint, Gaunt, Greengrass, Lestrange, Longbottom, Macmillan, Malfoy, Knott, Ollivander, Parkinson, Prewett, Rosier, Roll, Selwyn, Shacklebolt, Shafiq, Slughorn, Travers, Weasley, and Yaxley. In a society already struggling with prejudice, this directory became a social weapon. It offered a concrete, seemingly official reason for pure blood supremacy. It drew a line in the sand, separating the sacred from everybody else. Families on the list used it to boost their status, arrange strategic marriages, and grab political influence. The Malfoys, the Lestranges, the Blacks. Their power seemed set in stone by this one document. It gave a simmering prejudice the air of academic legitimacy, but that legitimacy was a carefully constructed illusion. The first and most obvious crack in this pure blood fantasy appears when you ask one simple question: where are the Potters? By any reasonable standard, the Potter family was an ancient and distinguished pure bloodline, so why were they so obviously missing from a list of truly pure blood families? The answer tells you everything you need to know about the lie at the heart of this project. The Potters were left out for purely political and petty reasons. First, their last name, Potter, was a common Muggle name. According to the list's biased author, this muddied their otherwise pure bloodline, even with no proof of Muggle ancestry. It wasn't about facts, it was about appearances. The name just didn't sound magical enough. More importantly, the Potters had a history of being pro-Muggle. This was their ultimate sin in the eyes of a pure-blood supremacist like the directory's suspected author. A notable ancestor, Henry Potter, who served on the Wizengamot, was publicly shamed for his pro-Muggle activism. In the world of the pure-blood directory, defending Muggle rights or having a common last name was enough to get you erased from history, no matter what your actual family tree looked like. And we know for a fact the Potters were pure-blooded because Doria Black, a member of the notoriously purity-obsessed Black family, married a Charlize Potter and wasn't disowned or blasted off the family tapestry. That would have been unthinkable if he had any recent Muggle blood. The exclusion of the Potters wasn't a mistake. It was a deliberate political statement. It was the first clear sign that the Sacred 28 wasn't a historical record, but a prejudiced manifesto. It wasn't about who was actually pure, but about who fell in line with the author's hateful ideology. The exclusion of the Potters is just the start. When you look closer, the entire premise of the Sacred 28 falls apart, revealing the biases and outright lies it was built on. Let's start with the man widely believed to be the author, Cantankerous Not. I mean, the name Cantankerous should tell you something right there. This wasn't a neutral historian, he was a pure blood supremacist with an agenda. His goal wasn't to document history, but to rewrite it to fit his bigoted worldview. It's a safe bet that he excluded other families with valid pure blood claims like the Crabbs and Goyles for the same petty reason as the Potters. Their surnames also existed in the Muggle world. The entire selection process was poisoned from the start. This brings us to one of the most surprising names on the list, the Weasleys. The Weasley family was, and is, famously known as blood traitors by extremists. They've always been proudly pro-Muggle. So why on earth were they on a list of sacred purebloods? Because their bloodline was, genealogically speaking, undeniably pure. But the Weasleys themselves were so disgusted by the whole idea that they immediately and publicly denounced being on the list, proudly affirming their connections to Muggles. Their inclusion, and their immediate rejection of it,
is a powerful takedown of the entire project. It shows that even when the author got the family tree right, the ideology was so toxic that decent families wanted nothing to do with it. But maybe the most damning evidence against the directory's credibility is the Ollivander family. The Ollivanders are an ancient line of wand-makers, with a history going back to 382 BC. Of course, they were on the list. Just one small problem. By the time the directory was published in the 1930s, the most famous Ollivander of the modern era, Garrick Ollivander, had a Muggle-born mother. This means that at the very moment of its publication, one of the supposedly sacred pure-blood families was, by the list's own strict definition, no longer pure. This wasn't just bias. It was a straight-up factual error that exposes the author's shoddy research. The list was already out of date the second it was printed.
So, a biased author created a flawed, inconsistent list. Why does it matter? It matters because this single, fraudulent document had a catastrophic and lasting impact on the wizarding world. It gave false legitimacy to the hateful ideology of pure-blood supremacy. Families like the Malfoys, the Lestranges, and the Blacks used the Sacred 28 as both a shield and a sword. It validated their arrogance and became a cornerstone of their political power. They arranged marriages exclusively within these circles, consolidating wealth and influence, all while looking down on lesser families. The list didn't just reflect prejudice, it supercharged it, creating a social hierarchy that poisoned wizarding society for decades. This ideology of blood purity became the fertile ground where Lord Voldemort planted the seeds of his revolution. It's no coincidence that so many of his most loyal Death Eaters came from the Sacred 28. Avery, Caro, Lestrange, Malfoy, Nott, Rosier, Yaxley, the list goes on. These families weren't just following a powerful dark wizard, they were acting on a belief system that had been celebrated for a generation, thanks in large part to the Pureblood Directory. But the greatest irony, the ultimate self-destruction of this entire ideology, comes from the list's most fanatical family, the Gaunts. Descended from Salazar Slytherin himself, the Gaunts were obsessed with their pure-blood heritage to a violent, self-destructive degree. And it was from this sacred and pure family that the wizarding world's greatest threat emerged. Merope Gaunt, in a desperate act, used a love potion on a Muggle, Tom Riddle Sr. The result was a half-blood son, Tom Riddle Jr., who would grow up to become Lord Voldemort. Think about that. The pure-blood extremist movement, which used the Sacred 28 as its playbook, was ultimately led by a half-blood who descended from the list's most fanatical family. The whole ideology ate itself. At the same time, the families who were either kicked off the list, like the Potters, or who rejected it, like the Weasleys, were the ones who stood up to fight him. Families like the Longbottoms and Pruitts, who were on the list but valued courage over blood status, became heroes in the fight against Voldemort. History proved that character, not blood, was the true measure of a witch or wizard. So, when you strip it all down, what is the Sacred 28? It's nothing more than historical fraud. It was never a true account of family history. It was a piece of propaganda written by a bigot to enforce a social hierarchy that served a prejudiced few. Its criteria were arbitrary, its research was sloppy, and its conclusions were built on lies. The list shut out deserving families for political reasons, while including others that either didn't fit the criteria or wanted nothing to do with the so-called honour. It created a false idol of blood purity that fueled generations of prejudice and led to 2 devastating wizarding wars. The great lie of the Sacred 28 is the belief that our blood is what defines us. But as the history of the wizarding world shows us, again and again, it's not where we come from, but what we choose to be, that truly matters. The story of the Sacred 28 is a perfect example of how easily history can be twisted. But now I want to hear from you. Which family's exclusion from the list do you find the most outrageous? Was it the Potters? Or is there another family you think was unfairly erased? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And if you want more breakdowns of hidden truths in the wizarding world, make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.